Well, that is my all-time favorite song, and so I appreciate leading it, and I think it went well myself. It's obvious that maybe school is out and that we passed Mother's Day where we had kind of a full building and people are beginning to scatter a little bit and summer activities, and I think all of that's wonderful. But I'm glad you're here this morning, and as always, I hope you'll be blessed by what we are going to talk about this morning. Have you looked at that title? I never, ever pay attention to a title of one of these lessons. In fact, it almost always works this way. Late in the week, Zonell will text me, and she will have two words, sermon title, question mark. And it will be the first time I've thought about a title. And usually within 20 seconds, I can think about what I'm going to talk about. I give her some kind of title, and sometimes it relates and sometimes maybe not so much. But this week was different. This week I actually wrote down a title before I even started thinking about what I would say. The title, The Dead Live. And it sounds kind of like a Hollywood horror movie. In fact, I suspect if I would have Googled it, I could have probably found some movie that would have been titled The Dead Live, a horror movie. But this is not in any way related to that kind of a thought. In fact, I will tell you that that statement may be the greatest statement that you could ever hear on this planet. And for those people I keep calling kingdom people, without doubt, it is the absolute best statement we can ever consider. The dead live. And I'm going to approach that topic by going back to where we were last week in John chapter 11 and try to give you this morning really good news. Do you remember that Jesus has left Jerusalem and he has gone back to the Jordan River? We think probably, from the text at least, about a day's journey by foot. And he's probably left Jerusalem because he is weary and he's tired of all the criticism and all the critique and all the condemnation of the Pharisees. And the Pharisees have literally been trying to kill him. So maybe it is rest and maybe it is vacation as he goes back to that place, it says, where John had been baptizing, there at the Jordan River. And it's while he's there that he gets the message. A messenger comes from the house of Lazarus and his sisters, Martha and Mary. Everybody remember the message? Lazarus is sick. And so Jesus finally decides and tells his disciples, we're going to go back. And you remember how they don't want to go back. Jesus, don't you remember they were trying to stone you? It's dangerous back there for all of us. But finally Jesus says, Lazarus is dead. And we are going back. So now they're getting close. They're getting close to the little town of Bethany, outside of Jerusalem. And they're in the house of Mary and Martha, used to be Lazarus. Mary and Martha are brokenhearted, as you would understand. Their brother has died. And now some Jews have come from the city of Jerusalem to show compassion and to try to comfort. And don't we all understand what that's like? When someone dies and we kind of know the family and we're close to the family, don't we try to go by and visit for a moment or go by and show our concern somehow? It's always a bit awkward for me to do that. I never know what to say. And yet sometimes it may be best to say nothing, just to show up for a moment. And the Jews have gathered together there with Martha and Mary. And Martha learns that Jesus is near. He's near the house. And so Martha goes out. Now, Mark's going to put a lot of these scriptures up. You can read the scriptures on the screen. I'll tell most of the story. Do you remember anything about Martha? She's probably in the family a little more direct, a little more to the point. Everybody understand that? Some of us are and some of us aren't. You may remember a story about Mary and Martha in the home of Lazarus, Mary and Martha. And Jesus is there with others, and Martha's preparing a meal. And where is Mary? She's over where Jesus is, listening to Jesus. And Martha finally leaves the kitchen area, I suppose, and she goes over to Jesus. She said, "Tell her to get up and come and help me." Now, the way I would say that is, Martha storms out of the kitchen and says, "Jesus, tell her to get up and get in here and help me. I'm tired of doing this all by myself." She's kind of direct, I think. And she goes out first. And she says, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, though he's dead, even now God would give to you whatever you ask of him." Now, I want you to understand, as I've been talking over and over again about the book of John, is about the word belief. This lady really does believe. She believes so much that she's convicted of it. She's totally convinced. She's devoted in her belief. "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that you can ask God anything and God's going to give it to you." And Jesus responds and says, "Your brother will rise again." But she immediately goes to what she's always been taught. See, most of the Pharisees believed, and most of the Jews therefore believed, that there would be a resurrection day. That there would be a day when everybody would rise from the grave. And so she immediately assumes that's what Jesus is talking about. Oh, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection and that last day. That's what most of them believed. But Jesus says, "Martha, I am the resurrection." Now, this is really important, okay? I know it's a tired Sunday and you may be a little bit sleepy, but this is really important. Martha, I am the resurrection. I am the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you catch all that? The dead live. Martha, do you believe this? Do you believe this? That's a really important question. I'll ask you, do you believe this? Now look at her response. "Yes, Lord. I believe you are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come to this world. I believe this. You are sent from heaven." And she leaves. Now the question is, do you think she left with a different emotional context than that with which she came? She came brokenhearted. She came wondering. She came sick at heart. I wonder if she leaves feeling a bit better after this conversation. And now she goes back to the house. Remember, the house is crowded. Mary's there. And there are Jews there who have come to comfort. And discreetly, Martha will go to Mary. Quietly. "The teacher is here. The teacher is here. Jesus is out there. And so Mary, if you'll keep reading on this passage, jumps up quickly. And she gets out of the house. And these Jews who are watching think she must be going to the tomb. Because Lazarus had been buried in this kind of cave-like place with a stone rolled over it. But she's not going to the tomb. She's going to meet Jesus. And they follow her. Now, when Mary arrives, she is brokenhearted, but I want you to notice how she approaches Jesus. She's not as direct. She's maybe more tender-hearted, we might say. When she saw him, she fell at his feet. And then she said, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. But there's no response. Jesus doesn't continue the conversation with Mary like he did with Martha. You know why? He can't talk for a moment. When he saw her weeping, and he saw that the Jews who had come along were weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit. Now notice the word spirit. It's a little s. He was deeply moved in what? His heart. And was troubled. Do all of you know what that means? Are you not once in a while just overcome with emotions? When the tears show up? Because something has pricked your heart? It happens to me too often, in my opinion. It's a Jones trait. My dad was that way. It happened to me last week in a time I didn't want it to happen. It happened to me just not very long ago. Steve and Michelle have remodeled the inside of Mom and Dad's house. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, absolutely beautiful. Not finished with the outside yet, but inside is beautiful. So Susan and I went down to see it the other night. And when we went in, on this little table, there is a wooden, a piece of wood. And someone had taken a picture of my dad with his cowboy hat on. And they had drawn that in wood. It looked just like him. Just like him. I couldn't keep the tears back. I was troubled in my heart. I was moved. I couldn't keep them back. And so Jesus doesn't finish the conversation. Instead, he asks, where have you laid him? Where's the tomb? And they said, come and see. And what does it say Jesus is doing as they make their way? See, that's the way it works. When you're troubled in heart, when you're overwhelmed with emotions, you sometimes can't keep the tears back. And though I don't like it when it happens to me sometimes, it's okay. It's okay. And don't ever forget, by the way, that what Jesus saw in Mary, he sees in us even right now. When he saw her crying, when he saw her brokenhearted, don't ever forget. Jesus has this great, enormous compassion that has never changed. So they lead Jesus to the tomb. And Jesus says, roll the stone away. But Martha's there now too. Now remember I told you a moment ago that Martha believes? This is really important, for me at least. Martha really believes. And that means you have this overwhelming conviction, this overwhelming faith, and you do believe that Jesus can do anything. But even for those of us who really strongly believe, once in a while, logic takes over. And logic can be an enemy to faith. Once in a while, logic jumps into my mind when I know God can handle it. And here comes logic. Roll the stone away. And Martha says, not a good idea. Not a good idea. He's been there 4 days. And by this time, there's an odor. You see it? You see how that works? This woman believes with all her might. She's convinced. Whatever you ask of God, God will give it to you. Martha, do you really believe I'm the resurrection, I'm the life? Yes, Lord, I believe you came from heaven. You're the Son of God. But now, logic jumps in. But Jesus doesn't slow down. In a loud voice, he cries out, Lazarus, come out. Now, you'll read these scriptures. He'll pray first. He'll thank God. And he'll thank God not because he knows he needs to talk to God about doing this first, but so that all these people might believe. So these people will know that you are my Father. See, that's what John wrote this book for one reason. Well, it's everybody to believe. But still in a loud voice. What you and I would call a shout. Lazarus, come out. And he comes out. And it would be one of these strange sights. Awkwardly comes out because his hands and his feet are wrapped in that linen cloth, and his face is wrapped in that linen cloth. And what a sight it would be. And he says, Jesus says, take the cloth off of him, unleash him, let him go. And the story ends with the dead alive. The dead live. You could take time and wonder about Lazarus. Do you think people ask him what it was like? Do you think for months and maybe years to come, people would line up at the house and say, Lazarus, what was it like? I suspect all that, but we're not told any of that. John just wants us to know that the dead live. That Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Now, I think I want to talk more about that. I'm not sure. Next weekend is Memorial Day weekend and Memorial Sunday. I may go back again and talk about what happens when a Christian really dies. We may do that next week, just to make sure we understand this point. But I want to end with something different this morning. Now, it's not different. I say it all the time. You remember when I talk about kingdom people all the time? That's a term I like to use. These are people who really, really believe that Jesus is who he claimed to be. They believe everything that we read this morning. And when you really, truly believe in Jesus and you see him as God's Son, who didn't have to be here, you can't help but to see yourself. And that presents a problem. Because when I see myself, I always see that I do not, as we would say, measure up. I see my flaws. Do you see yours? Susan and I have gotten into a little bit of a habit, that sometimes we will watch on Amazon Prime movies that are free, but they're only, the ones we watch are faith-based movies. And they're not done very well. The acting is not very good. And sometimes the storyline you like and sometimes you don't. Well, Friday night we watched one. It fit all those characteristics, except the title of it was The Grace of God. And what happened in the story was that in this little church, people began to realize that they were all messed up. That we have in us a little deceit. That we have in us a little greed. That we have in us a little theft. That we have in us, how long could I keep going with that? Is it true? Is it not true? Do you think I stand up here and try to give these lessons every week and I've got it all together? Of course not. No more together than anybody in the audience. And when you believe in Jesus and you see who He is, you begin to see who you are. And you know you need help. And then you begin to realize that He came to cover all of us with cleanness. And to keep covering us with cleanness. And I think Gary said that in his prayer as he opened all this. He forgives us. He makes us right. And because He does that for me, I really want, because of my belief, I really want to live like He asked to live. And I really want to live in obedience to Him. And I really want, that's that word we call repentance. I get tired of using that word because sometimes I think we just hear it and it glosses over us and it passes by us. I really want to be a different kind of person. I'm tired of losing my temper. I'm tired of saying things I shouldn't say. And I don't want to be like that. And then along the way, I do in obedience. I get baptized. Just like what John was doing with him at the Jordan River. John's been talking all through his gospel about it. And I come out of all that as a kingdom person. I come out of that as a recreated person. Still flawed, but looking and seeing Jesus continue to cleanse me and making me different. And all the while as I grow in that, I want to be different. I want to be more like Him. All because I truly believe. And that's the real problem. I'm convinced that a lot of people, even people who go to church, may not really, really deeply believe. Because it's far more than just saying, oh yeah, I kind of think that's right. That's not what this is about. This is a conviction that makes you see yourself and know you need something different. And so we become a room full of people who are all messed up, right? And we're redeemed and we're cleansed because of His perfection. That's why we become people that don't judge very much. Because how can I judge you so harshly when I got my own problems? It's really why Jesus said, be careful how you judge, because before you try to fix somebody else's problem, take a look at your own. You've likely got a bigger one. A great paraphrase, but that's... Everybody got the idea? So the dead live because of Jesus. And we're going to celebrate that this morning by just remembering briefly the sacrifice he really made. You see, he died every bit as much as Lazarus died. And he was raised every bit as much as Lazarus was raised. But the difference is, when he did it, he said, he let us know. The apostles will write later, especially Paul. Once he did that, you and I never have to worry about death ever again. He overcame it. Death has no sting. All because of what Jesus did.